Press the button, my friend.
The Out of Bounds Show is live from the Whiskey 61 Lounge in the Bank Plus studio.
Check it out.
Hey, y'all can go ahead and get ready. There will be a quarterback or two kind of come out of nowhere in the NFL draft that we don't talk about. You know, we stay on the Hendon Hooker, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, I guess Will Levis. He does look like he's got everything he needs, except good offensive coaching. But there'll be a couple come out of nowhere. And I still believe that Hendon Hooker will be a top 10 pick. We are the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Mississippi State has a week off this week, and Mike Leach was talking about dinosaur hands and all sorts of things, and his team being intimidated by the crimson and white jersey of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, I'll give the defense credit. They played really well considering they don't have enough talent on that side of the ball. But I don't know what Arnett did on like Tuesday and Wednesday last week, but whatever he did, maybe he threatened the mill plan. And I'm kidding because you can't do that. But whatever he did, it worked. But still can't get anything going against an Alabama-type team on offense. Can't get off the line of scrimmage. I mean, this same deal last 13 years, Mullen, Moorhead, Freeze. Can't upgrade the talent at wide receiver. And in the Sun Belt, I mean, you got to hit on somebody. Memphis, Troy, Lafayette, North Texas, and others have hit on guys. So we're live in the Bank Plus studio. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by the Purple Mattress at Muskelly Sleep Store, any of the 7 locations. Check out the Purple Mattress from Muskelly Sleep Store. I love mine. We welcome in Steve Robertson, Hail State Insider, Gene's Page, 247 Sports, the Boneyard Podcast. He joins us on the Dos Equis guest line. And, Steve, what's the latest on Dylan Johnson, LaQuinston Sharp, and Jaden Crumedy? Let's just go ahead and get into an injury report for Hail State.
Well, there's a good chance they all play against Auburn. And I'm told that Sharp could have played last weekend if needed. But with the bye week coming up, probably best to rest him. Dylan Johnson, is a guy that got a little bit banged up against Kentucky. There's this discussion that he'll be available for Auburn, but a lot of it's going to depend on how he responds here this week, with treatment. And Jaden Crumedy is a guy that about a month ago, rumors were that he would be able to play against Alabama. He didn't. But the hope is Auburn. And, of course, you get the bye week this week for the open date, I guess technically is what we call it. But it looks like State should be close to full strength when the Tigers come to town here in 2 weekends.
So if you had to bet money, you would bet all that book money you've made. If you had to bet money, you would say all 3 play against Auburn?
Well, I wouldn't bet all the book money on anything. But
no, I didn't mean all the book money, but just $100 of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If we go margin with that, I would bet $100 or so that those guys are able to play. Now how effective they are and how much they play kind of remains to be seen. I would say LaQuinston Sharp is probably the closest to being 100%. And with Crumedy, you worry about, just the lack of time. It's like being off the football field and getting in football shape takes a lot of time. That's why you have fall camp. And, he hasn't had really full contact since the middle of camp. And so that's the thing you kind of wonder about. How effective can you be? Yes, getting him back helps you. He's a very talented player, perhaps your most talented defensive lineman. But, how game ready will he be, in week 1 back on recovery? And, Dylan Johnson's a guy that plays with a real sense of urgency. And, he's a lot better than some guys in college football at 90%. That's just the reality of it. He's a guy that plays really hard. And so, I would anticipate all of them seeing action against Auburn.
Anybody else that is out or needs to get help? John Lewis, anything there? What?
Yeah, I mean, Lewis has played a little bit, and I really expected him to play a lot more. And of course, he has the injury in camp, and really what State needs with him is just to get some reps, because he's going to have to really challenge next year for a much bigger role, and he's certainly talented enough to do it. Dollarville Johnson's a guy, of course, that missed some time, played against Kentucky, played against Alabama, but he's nowhere near 100%. The hope is with this week being the open date, and then next week, kind of 2 more weeks of not getting full contact, that he'll be closer to 100%. But that's the thing about these high ankle sprains and things like that, these foot injuries, especially for guys that carry some girth. It takes a while for them to recover, and so the hope is that he's kind of trending in the right direction, and he should be. I didn't think he played bad against Alabama, but you can tell he's limited somewhat.
Okay. Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. What's realistic for this team to do in the next 2 weeks to try to win 2 or 3 more games on the way out?
Well, I think this week is about kind of getting your legs back under you. When you've played all these games in a row, and you only get the one bye date these days, or open date. But this week will be coaches are on the road a lot, recruiting right now. So in many respects, you got GAs kind of running practice and things like that. And again, the team understands what practice is all about. You don't have an opponent you're preparing for this week, so you're not implementing game plan, things like that. You're going through practice, keeping guys crisp, getting them sharp, and kind of getting their legs back under them. So I think this week is probably a good week at this point in the season, because this month of November is going to define the Mississippi State season, and could in many respects define the Mike Leach era here at Mississippi State. You need to take a step forward this year, and that's always been the expectation is, hey, can they go from 7-5 to 8-4 in the regular season? Well, you drop that Kentucky game, which is a game you really weren't expecting to lose, and now you got to make it up somewhere. Now, are there 3 winnable games on this schedule? Yeah, I guess you could make an argument that all 4 of them are winnable, but I don't think anybody that is objective gives State much of a chance to beat Georgia. But you could win the other 3, and I think certainly you feel good about Auburn and then East Tennessee State in the Egg Bowl. You never know what's going to happen there. I mean, you never know what shape each team's going to be in by the time you get there. Even with 4 weeks to go, you simply don't know. But yeah, State will be a bowl team. That of which we can be assured is State of Florida bowl team. At this point, I'd say no. But you look around the league and you look at that A&M is slipping behind State, Auburn slipping behind State, Vandy, Missouri not going to make a bowl game. South Carolina's probably evenly situated with State. And if you end up in a situation where you and Arkansas have the same record, well, then you would win because of the head-to-head matchup there. And so State's got a lot left to play for. So they can't go out there and certainly lay an egg against Auburn and then limp to the finish by any stretch.
How big is the Auburn game at home for the staff?
I think it's big for everybody. And I think this is a game, too, especially with 2 weeks to prepare. This is an Auburn team that is absolutely struggling. And granted, they had the bye week last week. They're going to play a very physical ball game this week against the University of Arkansas. And that's interesting, too. You look at 2 of the 4 games that Mississippi State has left. The opponent plays Arkansas the week before. And no matter what you think about Sam Pittman in Arkansas, they play a physical brand of football. So you're going to get kind of beat up. So Arkansas can kind of play the role of kind of meat tenderizer in some respects for State here in the next couple of, the next few weeks. And so I think you got to get out and take care of Auburn. And that's a game I don't think anybody expected Auburn to come in here and win. But when you look at how this team played against the run against Kentucky, you kind of raise an eyebrow a little bit and say, well, that could be trouble. And then you see how they played against Alabama, and that's where I think Arnett and company have to step up. They have to be the tone setters. They have to kind of control the flow of this game and give the offense the football back with greater regularity.
Steve Robertson, 247 Sports, Gene's page on the Dos Equis guest line. So the bottom line is the same old, discussion is in play for this Mississippi State program. Football. They need better offensive skill talent. Now, it's easy just to say they need to recruit better players. More explosive players. They need it at running back. They need it at receiver. They'll eventually need it at quarterback. So you keep up with this. I mean, what's the answer? Because that's been the scuttlebutt on your board, on our show, and every other Mississippi State media platform this week.
Well, I think you're exactly right about one thing. It's not just recruiting related. I mean, obviously you'd love to go out there and get a 4 or 5 star type guy that could come in here and be an alpha for you. But, sometimes that has to be developed. I do think State's wide receiver class this past year was really good. And I think this guys could potentially be some difference makers, but you got to develop them. That's the big thing there is you have to see guys get better. And there's some guys in this wide receiver room that are basically the same guy they were last year. And so you ask yourself, okay, is this a coaching situation? Is it a player situation? Is it an evaluation situation? Do you have some guys maybe playing in the wrong spot? I think that's something the staff's got to decide kind of moving forward. But I was disappointed in the play of the wide receivers against Alabama. And listen, I get it. Alabama's going to field one of the best secondaries in the country every single year because that's a position group that Nick Saban places a premium on. That guy's built a history and a legacy of great secondary play, but I thought State played soft. And that's the disappointing part of it. It's like you hear so much about, accountability and things like that within this program. And then you have some guys go out there and alligator arm some balls, not really get out there and compete. And there's a couple balls that probably should have been picked, but the wide receivers didn't get in there and really fight for the football and made those opportunities available for Alabama. Fortunately, they didn't get picked, but not that we, subscribe to the Kellenberger doctrine. But my point being is that this personnel group, this last 4 weeks of the season, has to step up and play physical, use their hands, and get out there and compete for the football. And there's some times this year they've done that. But I think in the last couple of weeks, that group has regressed a little bit. And I think that, the challenge is now on the table for those guys.
What does the recruiting schedule look like for Leach and the coaches on an off week?
Well, they're doing, some in-person recruiting. They're out there during the evaluation period and going to practices and things like that and talking to coaches. And of course, there's some, limited contact with players, and State's offered some new players. We've seen some defensive back offers go out, a lot of junior recruiting and things like that. But, guys like Malik Ellis has been committed to Mississippi State for a long time. Mississippi State was in Laurel High School earlier this week. And so it'll ramp up a good bit here in about a month, as you guys know. When the weekend ends after Thanksgiving, coaches are on the road for the better part of, the holiday season. But they're out right now just kind of, not necessarily establishing many new relationships, even though there are a few. But you're out there kind of running the roads and going and seeing the guys that are committed to you and your priority targets. And then there's some schools, of course, that'll have some prospects for next year. You always want to show your face in those. But, yeah, it's a busy week with everything that's going on, and the fact that you kind of get a chance to get out on the road and kind of give the team a bit of a break too. But the reality of it is, for his coaches, the recruiting process never stops.
Okay. Who would be some targets that could upgrade the offensive skill talent for Leach and the staff somewhat overnight?
Well, I tell you, there's a couple guys that I really like in the state. We talk about Aiden Williams a lot, and from the very beginning, he was a guy that everybody said was, if he stayed in state, would go to Ole Miss. You look up, well, he's committed to Ole Miss, and so no real surprise there. But you'd like to think, if you're Mississippi State and you're the pass happy scheme, that you'd be able to be more in the game with guys like that. And that's the thing I think you got to work on there. Is despite the fact that there may be some earlier leanings, you got to be able to go sell yourself to in-state prospects like that. You've got to be able to get those guys in. Now, there's a few other guys out there. I love Creed Whittemore. We hadn't talked about him. Creed Whittemore is a guy that's from Gainesville, Florida. His dad's a coach. His mom was a volleyball player at Florida. He has a brother that's at Florida. This is a guy that can really do it. Now, he's an athlete playing quarterback that'll transition over to wide receiver. So there's a learning curve there in that respect. But I think this is a guy, too, that has some alpha about him. I think that this is a guy that you will see kind of hit the ground running. This kid's a winner. I think he does make you better. He's already established a relationship with Chris Parson. Turns out his cousin got to know Chris during the Elite 11 trials. They've become great friends. They're in contact every day. And the thing that you like about that is that it's pretty decor, because you want kids to be committed to each other and not just your program. And so that way, if there is some up and down, those guys will stick together and say, hey, we'll come in there as a group and make this better. And so really like him, and I think that he's a guy that'll make this team better. And when I think about this running back group, Dante Dowdell is right out there. And that's a guy, too, again, not to be hypercritical, but State should offer that kid back in February. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Whether he's a linebacker, a running back, or a holder or whatever, that guy's a football player. And I think when there's guys like that with that kind of ability in your home state, you got to get on them early, and you just figure it out later. You figure out the projected position later. I mean, you did that with Ty Jones, right? I mean, Ty Jones is one of the better football players in the state of Mississippi, and nobody really talks about him. But you didn't know. Is he a defensive end? Is he a running back? We'll just figure it out, okay? And I think that's the approach you should have taken with Dante Dowdell. And now you're kind of fighting from behind to get him. But if State gets him, if you're able to flip him from Oregon, that's a very significant commitment.
Okay. Steve Robertson, 247 Sports, the Boneyard Podcast. He joins us on the Out of Bounds show and the Dos Equis guest line. What? So you think Oregon is in play or Ole Miss?
Well, he's committed to Oregon, but I think Ole Miss has made up some ground with him. And the thing that I go back to is there was a time that when he was getting ready to announce his decision, and there was a lot of heat that it would be Ole Miss, and ultimately it was Oregon. So he's already had the opportunity to commit to Ole Miss one time. Can they get him in a second go-around? I think in the end, he will probably end up in the state of Mississippi. I think it probably ends up being a State-Ole Miss battle. I just don't see Oregon being able to hang on to a kid from Picayune, Mississippi. I mean, and we've seen this happen several times in the last few years where Oregon gets hot on a kid from the South. Now, they do have a handful of guys from Alabama, but like DJ James, a guy that's a former Mississippi State commitment, goes up there and ends up transferring to Auburn. And so, as Ed Orgeron used to say, planes just don't fly north, when it comes to college football in the South. And I think Dante Dowdell will end up picking a school much closer to home, and it could very well break down into a State-Ole Miss battle.
All right. Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. How is Sawyer Robertson progressing? What are you hearing on that front? The backup, I guess the backup QB at Mississippi State behind Will Rogers. What is he creating any kind of buzz in practice? Do they think he's getting better? Do they think he can play SEC football, or is he this probably isn't fair. I don't think anybody's labeled him a bust, but where is he?
No, he's absolutely not a bust. And, his time will come. And I think that's kind of basically the position we're in. He makes the jump this year. Last year, he was basically a scout team quarterback. This year, he's getting all the second team reps and then a lot of fall camp reps. With some practices, he took more reps than Will did with the ones. And so, yeah, he's progressing, but he's not about to overtake Will Rogers. And it's like I read some of the social media commentary, and I just think, where do people get this stuff from? Could it be a battle next year in camp? Yeah, I think it certainly will be. And if Mike Leach, whether it is or it isn't, he's going to say it is. And 2 years in a row, that's what we've heard. It made Will Rogers earn it. I do think Will is back next year. I think Sawyer Robertson, of course, is a guy now that has used 1 year of eligibility. I think he understands coming in, this is a job that I have to earn, but I probably have to bide my time a little bit. And so I don't think that he is maybe a candidate for the transfer portal this year. But if Will Rogers decides to come back in 24, possibly. I think at that point you've got to look, if you're Sawyer Robertson, and think, hey, I've only got so much life to live and so much time to play college football. But yeah, Sawyer has taken a nice jump this year, but I don't think it's a big enough jump where that he ever made Will Rogers uncomfortable.
Okay. And if they lose Marks and Dylan Johnson for whatever reason, they think they're good enough to go to the NFL. I don't think they are, but that's what kids do this day and age. Where are they? What are they left with at running back, other than Simeon Price?
Well, and I think there's a good chance Hargrove goes back in the portal. I mean, this is a good opportunity this past weekend to play him, and you didn't. That's the thing. It's like, he goes in the portal, he comes back out, and I think as a coach, you got to ask yourself, can I count on this kid? Everybody seems to say he's doing okay, but yet we never see him on the field. So I think there's a good chance that you'll lose him too. Mm-hmm. That's why I think going and get Dowdell so important. But I think maybe if you see a situation where Marks and Dylan Johnson go, which I think both would be making a mistake. And I know people don't like it when we're that forthright about things, but I don't think they've done enough at this point to generate NFL buzz. And I think the people that love them need to be honest with them about that. If not, you're going to end up being a Makai Polk situation. And I think at this point, if we're fair about that, Makai Polk was a much better football player. But the reality of it is you may have to go into the portal or into junior college ranks to get a more experienced guy if that situation materializes. Because I'm a Simeon Price fan too. But if he's the only returning running back with any experience, that's a problem, and so you've got to be able to address that. I think that's opportunity for Dante Dowdell, of course, to come in and play early because Leach has shown a willingness to play young running backs. But I think when you look about what's healthiest for the team, you've got to go out and have an experienced guy. So hopefully one or both of those guys comes back, but if they don't, you've got to go get a more experienced guy.
What about Travion Williams, freshman defensive lineman? I know he's played some. Should he have played more?
Yeah, I think probably so. But, of course, I don't get to see him in practice in season. But, he is a very big and physical kid. And, he's played some and showed some real flashes in practice. He got banged up for a little while too. But, the future is really bright for a young guy like him. And that's, when we think about defensive line recruiting, because we have this discussion every year, it seems, when it comes to defensive line recruiting. And then in the end, State finds a way to figure it out. You get Ty Cooper a couple of years ago, and Dante, of course, is a guy that was an All-American. And their year has got to be next year. They got to step up next year and kind of be the dudes. I would like to see them got more playing time this year, but the reality of it is, that some of these games have been so tightly contested, you couldn't get too deep in the depth chart. But Travion's a guy that I think is going to be the bell cow on this team. I think probably for the next 2 years, and maybe ultimately he goes pro after year 3. I think that's going to be the guy that everybody's talking about is the next great defensive lineman at Mississippi State.
All right. Well, I think that's probably it. I could probably ask some tougher questions, but I'm going to hold to see what happens. I give the staff, they've done a pretty damn good job. People want more, I get it. I'd say, where would you grade them, Steve? I'd say they're at about a B+ since they arrived in Starkville. The COVID thing, you get a pass, although I don't think the Dave Emmerich-led program did enough during COVID. I think a lot of other SEC schools worked a lot harder and smarter and with more focus. But all in all, I think A to Z, on the field, off the field, everything else, I give them a B+. How would you grade the staff to date?
I would probably say closer to a B. I guess depending on what day you ask me, maybe I would say a B+. But, when I look at the 2020 year, and there are some people that did exceptionally well that year, but those are the exception rather than the rule, right? I mean, that's just the reality of life. If you look at last year, they took a step forward. I just think this can't be a year where you're taking a step back, if you're Mississippi State. And I understand the schedule's a little more difficult this year, but State needs to try to find a way to get to 8 wins this year. And I think if you get to 8, and the Egg is one of them, I think at that point everybody would consider the season a big success.
Yeah, I think they'll be a pretty big underdog in Oxford. 6+ points. But I do think you're right with the fan base. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it, man.
See you.
Lunch today is brought to you by one of Steve's favorite places, Bulldog Burger in Ridgeland, Bulldog Burger in Starkville, and Bulldog Burger in Tupelo. If you missed any of the show, including our amazing emoji discussion, then you can go to Apple Podcast and search the Out of Bounds Show. Apple Podcast, search the Out of Bounds Show. See you tomorrow.